I'm Dr. Yvonne Cason, the president of Spiritual Awakenings International. It's wonderful to have you here today. Um, we are really blessed to have a fabulous speaker joining us today, and that is Ann Archer Butcher. Now, Ann is a best-selling author, an international speaker, a book editor, and an in-demand publicist. She's a multiple STE experiencer, that is spiritually transformative experiences, starting as early as her childhood. She's had a remarkable, miraculous rescue where she was saved by dolphins in the ocean from a shark attack. And she had a profound shared near-death experience, an out-of-body journey that helped her save her sister's life, which she will be sharing with us today. And I'm really honored and delighted that Ann Archer Butcher serves on the board of directors of Spiritual Awakenings International. So with no further ado, I send it over to Ann Archer Butcher.
Yvonne, I am delighted. Thank you so much. I couldn't be happier to be here. I love the story that we're about to share today, and I just want to get started with it. So I believe you can see that it's exactly what Yvonne said. I'm an author, I'm an experiencer, and an international speaker. And today I want to talk about a remarkable shared near-death experience. But I also want to acknowledge Spiritual Awakenings International. It's a non-denominational organization with people from, I believe now, 114 countries of the world. And I am just very proud to serve on the board of this organization because it's exactly what I would have needed had it existed back when I was having these experiences. I came from a very conservative Christian background, and I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't know absolutely anything existed in terms of the tunnel of death or out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences or spiritually transformative experiences. And so I love the organization for existing so that people can learn, because there's seekers who seek out this organization exactly for the reasons that I would have, to find out more about their own experiences. So I welcome all of you today. Thank you, and I'll get started. As I said, I'm from South Carolina, and I doted on my older sister. You can see her here, the cute one with the dark hair. She was just 11 months older than me, but you see my protective arm on her. That sort of was our relationship, even though I'm 11 months younger. Today's story is about Debbie and her near-death experience and how I joined her in the process. To me, still, this is a mystery how this whole thing happened, but maybe in the Q&A at the end of this presentation, we'll gather more insights together. So my parents said that from an early age, I was obsessed with the need to talk to God. I was sure I had forgotten something very important that God had told me. And so I asked everybody, do you know how to talk to God? My mother was embarrassed. And she took me to church more often, and I actually got to meet the ministers. But my obsession with understanding what was going on in this world and knowing about the divine never abated. It continued. And as I was getting my master's degree at night, I was studying at master's degree level comparative world religions to try and get some of the questions I had answered. As you heard in the introduction, I was rescued by dolphins from a shark attack in the Atlantic Ocean when I was in my 20s. That had happened before the experience I'm about to share with you. And when the dolphins rescued me, they didn't just bring me into shore, they surrounded me and did this little exercise where they took turns touching my body. And I felt, as people now believe about dolphins, but remember, this was so many years ago, 50 years ago, I believe that they quickened me. They changed my vibration. My molecular structure felt that it was changed to the core. So I'm studying comparative world religions to try and understand more about what's going on in life. And as I was preparing to leave for my class, I'm sitting with my boyfriend, John. He came over and something amazing happened. All of a sudden, I saw. And I'm so excited because now, for the first time, I can show people what I saw. I saw this black hole appear in the room with swirling lights all around it. And I said to my boyfriend, "What is that?" And he said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And I said, "That black hole in the middle of the living room. Don't you see it? I mean, you can see it. You see what I saw." And I'm amazed that he can't see it at all. And he actually asked me, "Are you high?" And I'm like, "What? Of course not. What are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, why would you say there's a black hole in the room?" Well, so would you if you saw something like that. I had no idea what it was or why I was seeing it. I'm as innocent as can be, still about to leave for my master's degree class. And suddenly I felt myself being pulled through that dark hole as if I were being vacuumed into it. There was no stopping it. I just was being pulled. And I could feel that it was very cold. I could feel the cold emanating from it, and I didn't want to go in. And so on the couch, I'm telling John, hold me, because I'm trying to not get pulled in. Suddenly, I understood I am not this physical body because no matter how tightly John held on to me, I continued to be pulled into that hole. I simply could not stop it. It was dark all around me, so cold. It was as if I were entering a large freezer, and I did not want to go. I'm pulling back as hard as I can, but I have no ability to stop it. Then finally, I see a light at the end of the tunnel. It was a brilliant, beautiful light. And the next thing I know, I am actually standing in that light. And to me, this is what it looked like, a golden waterfall. It was it was magnificent, absolutely brilliant. And the waves were made of light, and there was a sound emanating from everything. And it was so brilliant that I couldn't quite see everything clearly enough, as if I needed sunglasses. And I was told, this is the first thing I heard, close your physical eyes. I felt a vast love and bliss, and I wanted to stay there forever. And I closed my physical eyes on the couch where I was still, my body is still sitting with John. And suddenly I could see clearly. I could see this. I could see the beautiful waves, not violent waves like on some beaches, but just these gentle rolling waves. And with them came love and bliss beyond anything I could ever have imagined. But I no sooner thought the thought, I want to stay here forever, when I was told this is the ocean of mercy and love. And to me, I felt like this is home. This is everything I've ever wanted. This is all that I could ever ask for. Look at the beauty all around me. I was feeling that I'll never even ask for a place to sit down. I'll just stand here forever. I have no needs anymore. I have no desires. All I want is this, whatever this is. I just want to be here forever. And I knew I was in the heavenly worlds of God. I know now that there are various planes of God, and I felt like I was in a very high and wonderful place. But I was instructed that there is much to be done. And I was told that first, there's one thing you must understand: there is no death. So that's a primary principle that I was taught immediately. There is no death. So this whole experience for me is about that, about life and death and what it really is. Remember, I'm studying comparative world religions. I want to understand what happens when we die. But now I know there is no death, and that there is much to be done, as in this kingdom, there's a lot to be done, but I don't want to do it. Immediately, I don't want to do it, because what do I want? I want to just stand here forever. Now, that was a very selfish thought. Normally, I wasn't selfish, but because of this bliss pouring through me and this love and this sense of fulfillment, I had the distinct sense that this is everything I've ever wanted, and I want to just stay here forever. But as the golden waves of light continued to wash through me, I heard another important message that everything is happening exactly as it should, whether it appears that way to you or not. Now, even in that moment, I thought this is a very controversial message. I'll have to contemplate what that really means because there's so many bad things that happen in life. And how can they all be exactly as they should, that everything is working as it should? Now, the concept truly means that everything is working for our good, especially when we surrender to it, when we recognize that. But it did take me years to begin to get a handle on that message. So, now I'm resisting leaving this heavenly world of beauty, but I was told that I must leave this fantastic world of light and bliss again because there is much to be done. Now, it's not about me that there's much to be done as far as I'm concerned, but my sense in that moment was surely somebody else can do it. I am so nothing. I'm so this minuscule being in this vastness of beauty. Can't I just be nothing and not do anything forever? Just leave me here. That's my sense. And I'm not allowed to stay. The next thing I know, I'm being pulled back through there, through the tunnel, and dumped back onto the couch. And I understand now that sometimes we carry physical evidence, and it has been called after effects back from our inner experiences. And when I returned, John, still sitting there with me, he didn't run and escape, looked at me and said, "Your eyes are sunburned. Oh my gosh, go to the bathroom and look. What happened to you?" And I realized, okay, that's why I was told to close my physical eyes. The light was too brilliant for me to look into, and it was actually having an effect on my physical body. But the good thing for me was that it gave me a sense of proof that I had actually been there, that I had left, that I had gone into that light, and that it was exactly as it should be. So, what I had learned while I was there was that someone near to you appears to be dying. That's what I hear. You must return and follow all instructions as they are given. Now, I didn't want to follow the instructions. I begged to stay. And if there is no death, even if someone near to me appears to be dying, who cares? Because there is no death. And if this is where you go, then hey, everybody, it's amazing, right? So I had no intention of participating in this, but I was told you must follow all instructions as they are given. To this day, that is one of my primary mandates, to follow all instructions as they are given, because we're not actually alone. That's what I sensed in this experience. We are all divine beings, and we're meant to co-work with the divine. We're meant to be hand in glove with the divine. But in order to have that great protection and love and guidance, we have to align ourselves with the divine. And so I spent many years trying to understand how to align myself more closely with the divine. But back to my experience now, I've been told someone near to you appears to be dying. So I went to school I went to class that night. And in my class, I want to tell you what's happened. So there I am with my sunburned eyes. It's a big class. It's a master's degree where you're working during the day and you go and study at night. And the professor, unbeknownst to me, was not speaking that evening. There was a guest lecturer, and he happened to be a fellow who had been to all of these hot spots on the planet, these places where the energy is just great and it's spiritual. And he's going to talk about that, what that really means, and where those places are, like Sedona, Arizona, that sort of thing. And I'm very excited to hear what he has to say because now I'm even more aware spiritually that there's this energy and I want to be a part of it. So I'm practically ready to run wherever he says the energy is greater. I'm ready to go. But he starts the class and he begins his talk. And then all of a sudden, he notices me at the back of the room. And he stopped talking and he said, I need everybody to take a break. Well, this is a master's degree night class, so it's a 2 hour class that we've been there 10 minutes. Nobody wants to get up and take a break. But he said, except the woman sitting in the back in the blue shirt. And so that was me. Everybody is grumbling. They don't want to break now. They've already gone to the bathroom. They've already had their coffee and tea and they don't want to go. And he's saying, out, out, everybody out. And he comes back to me and he said, what's happened to you? And I lied and said, nothing, and shook my head in denial. And he goes, you can't deny it. Remember, I'm the guy who's been to all the hot spots. And right now, this seat you're sitting in is one of the hot spots on the planet. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, you are glowing. He said, you don't have any idea what's happened to you, do you? And I said, no. And he goes, why are your eyes sunburned? What is that look on your face? And I said, I had an experience and I looked into a bright light. He goes, I'll say you did. He said, you need to go home. And I said, I don't want to go home. I want to hear your lecture. And he goes, no, you need to go home. You need to let your energy step down a little bit. And I'm sorry you even have to drive yourself home. You need to just go to bed. You need to rest and allow this to be integrated into your beingness. You're like flying all over the place back here, and I can see it clearly. And I said, okay, well, I'll study someone else's notes and I'll leave. So I got up and I left the class. Now, on the way home, an airplane flew over my vehicle because I was near the airport. And suddenly I found myself crying. I'm crying when the airplane goes over. And I hear another message. And the message is, remember, you must follow all instructions as they are given. And when you hear who it is that appears to be dying, you must get on a plane and fly there at once. So that's what the plane had instigated for me, was this next message. So I went home, and as my guest lecturer had said, I crawled in bed, pulled the covers over my head, and simply said, oh my God, I have no idea what's going on with me. It's too crazy. I don't understand it. I just want to be quiet. And so I fell asleep like that. Now, that day that this had all happened, it had been warm and beautiful in Indiana where I lived. But when I opened my eyes the next morning and looked out, it had snowed. There was snow everywhere, this white, gentle carpet of snow. And I thought, oh, it's like everything has been blessed with some purity. That's what it looked like to me, that this is a spiritual purity, this blanket of snow. And I got up and I went to school, and I'm in my class. Now, some of my students were very astute because they knew what happened to me when I came back from the dolphin experience. So I'm teaching high school, 16, 17, and 18-year-olds. And they were like, what happened to you? What's wrong with your eyes? Because it's even more pronounced than it was the day before. The redness has continued to and it looks like I've been crying and crying and crying is what it really looks like. But I said, no, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. I just irritated my eyes. I'm telling them nothing. And I start speaking and start my classes, and I'm doing my program exactly as I know to. And the principal walks in the room, and he said, Anne, you're going to need to come with me and bring your purse. And the students are all like, ooh, you're in trouble. And I said, bring my purse. Am I going somewhere? And he said, just bring your purse. I'll send somebody else up to your classroom. So I gave my students some instructions, walked into the hall, following the principal down to his office, saying, what's going on? And he goes, just come with me, Anne. When I went into his office, my boyfriend is standing there. So to me, from a professional perspective, this is all wrong. What's my boyfriend doing at work in the principal's office? And John says, Anne, you know that thing that happened last night to you? And I said, yeah. He said, well, I just learned that your sister is the person who appears to be dying, and she's in the hospital, and you need to go there right now. And he hands me this little bag. And I said, "What's this?" He said, "I went to your apartment. I got you clothes. I bought you a ticket." Nobody flew around like that back then. Remember how many decades ago this is. But there I am with my little bag ready to go get on an airplane. So he takes me straight to the airport and I fly to my sister's side. Now, at the same time that all this event had been happening to me the night before, my sister was unconscious in a hospital 700 miles away in New York. She was fading in and out between life and death, not expected to live through another day. And she worked on Wall Street. She was in a lot of pressure. She was a brilliant mathematician. They had tried to solicit her to Wall Street when she was 16 years old. And she was known all over the country for her brilliance. And they had her doing future math and future thinking and working with computers when nobody else even knew what a computer was. And so what had happened was she had suffered an aneurysm, but I didn't know that. I didn't even know what an aneurysm was. And I would not know about any of this until I arrive at the airport. I arrive at the airport. John has called my mother and told her that I'm on my way. My mother meets me at the airport, and my mother was extremely calm. And I said, "Mom, Debbie's dying. What's wrong with you? Why do you act like nothing's going on?" And she goes, "Because I talked to John and he said nobody's really dying." So, what I had heard in this experience, I had shared with John. And what I heard was there is no death, but this person who appears to be dying is not actually dying. It is only the illusion of death, and that you must go to them at once, and so on. So I had shared that with him. He shared that with my mother. And now my mother is calm, cool, and collected because she thinks Debbie's going to be fine. And I said, "Yeah, but we have to do everything I'm told to do. We have got to go do it." And so we go to the hospital, and, they had found Debbie unconscious. And what I had heard was someone close to you appears to be dying. In reality, there is no death. This is not death. It is only the illusion of death. But you must go to this person at once when you learn who it is. So she's been in a coma since the night before. And it was it was shocking when I get to the hospital to see my sister. She is white as a sheet. She has been in a coma the whole time. They think she's dying. She's in isolation. I'm supposedly not allowed to go into the room. But as I walk up to the glass wall, I can see my sister in there. The nurse opens the door and she said, "I'm sorry, but you can't come in. She's on the inside." And I put my hand on the door so she can't close it. And I said, "I need to come in. I need to see my sister," because I'm actually receiving that message now. Go to your sister. And I pushed lightly on the door, but it was as if the door just flung open. And the nurse looked startled by that. And she stood in my way. She got into right in front of me. And I put my hand up like this. I did not touch that woman at all. But she began stumbling backwards across the room. And I passed her by. She didn't fall. I passed her by and walked toward my sister. And she is arguing, saying, "You can't come in here. You can't come in here." My mother sticks her head in the door and she said, "I would let her do what she wants if I were you." Now, my mother has always been a very spiritual person, so she knows we're in the middle of something going on that needs to be paid attention to. So the nurse calls for another nurse, and now there's two nurses in the room saying, "You're going to have to leave." And I said, "No, you need to go and get a surgeon right now. I need to speak to a surgeon." And I'm getting instructions that say to place my right hand on my sister's left temple. And when I do, I can see inside her head. Now, I've never experienced anything like this before, but I can see a brain. But in that brain, I can see there's a busted balloon. That's what it looks like to me. There's this little pouchy thing that looks like a busted balloon that's deflated. And the nurses listening to my mother have gone to get a surgeon, and the surgeon comes in. This is a New York hospital. He's young. He's maybe 40 something years old. And He walks in, very sophisticated, young, sharp, and says, what are you experiencing? And I said, I can tell you, if you can draw a brain, I can show you what's wrong. Now, this was just before CAT scans were developed. So they had no CAT scan to put my sister in her coma so they could see inside her head. But I'm about to tell them exactly what's there. So he draws this great picture of a brain and he goes, what do you see? And I said, I see this busted balloon and it's right here. He goes, that's important because if it is where you say it is, we should be able to save your sister's life. He goes, if we don't do something, she'll be gone by tomorrow. And my mother said, we'll sign whatever you've got. My mother's still standing in the doorway listening to everything. She said, we'll sign whatever you've got. We'll release you to do surgery. But I said to him, I'll get there in a second. So by going through that black hole in the living room, I'd gone through the tunnel of death, something I had never heard of that I didn't know anything about, to help save Debbie. Was it a shared death experience or a surrogate death experience? To this day, I really don't know. But I was told how to help her, and I needed to follow all these instructions as they are given. And when I received that phone call saying my sister was in, well, John received the phone call saying my sister was in the hospital, I flew to Debbie immediately. And that began this process of me being in a heightened state. By listening, by following the instructions, it only got more and more intense. Now I'm with the doctor. Debbie, deathly pale. He says she won't last much longer. I saw what was wrong in her head. I meet with the surgeon and I tell him, and I said, why would you listen to me? And he said, I've seen this sort of thing before. And he agreed to operate on my sister based on my vision. In fact, he said, you probably know more about what's going on than anybody else on the planet right now. And I have confidence that we can do something to help your sister, or this would not be happening. I was just amazed, but I'll tell you something about him later at the end of this whole presentation. So he operated and Debbie lived. And through this amazing series of events, Debbie was able to live, meet her true love, Marty, and they had a beautiful son, my nephew, Joey. She lived for 10 more years and grew spiritually and emotionally as she basked in all that love. The emphasis for her became quite different in her life. Remember, I told you she was a world-class mathematician and she'd been sought after since she was a kid to help the government or to help in Wall Street. She was being solicited all the time by men in suits, as we call them. There are more men in suits coming to visit my sister. So always it was about her brain. Always it was about what she could do to help them understand more. But in this experience in the hospital, um, I stayed with her for 3 days. She was recovering very nicely. Everything was wonderful. She could write, she could talk, everything was good. And then I had to go back to Indiana. And when I left, they had removed all the mirrors in Debbie's hospital room. So she couldn't see the effect of the surgery, her shaved head and the big cut and all of that. She couldn't see it. It was not nice and neat like it might be now, because this is so long ago. And Debbie got up in the middle of the night, walked to a room next door that had a mirror, went to the bathroom, looked at herself, fainted, fell, and hit her head. And she became paralyzed on the left side. And so now she had to struggle to walk, struggle to use her arm. And it became all about having to re-enter the world, not as the brilliant mathematician she was, but as a woman who wanted to live, a woman who wanted to find love. And Marty found her like that. And together they had my nephew Joey. So remember the line about everything is happening exactly as it should, whether it appears that way to you or not. I understood when I got the call from my mother to say something's happened to Debbie, she hit her head, that this was what that line for me in that moment was really all about. Because it opened Debbie to a level of humility. Now she had to struggle as other people struggled. Debbie never had struggled for anything in her entire life. She was so brilliant and so sought after and essentially spoiled in every possible way. But now she struggled. She had compassion for other people. I remember if she heard a siren, like even if it was a siren for a policeman or an emergency vehicle of any sort, tears would come down her face because she would know somebody is suffering. That's what she said to me. Somebody is suffering. So she grew in compassion. She grew in love. And I began to understand that's what we're really here for. We're here to become more compassionate, more loving, more aware of each other. And so I learned, but Debbie also grew tremendously and had baby Joey and we had a wonderful time together. We had many great years together. But at the 10th year mark of having that experience, Debbie called me one day and she said, Annie, I have a terrible headache. And I said, are you going to the doctor? She said, I'm going straight to the hospital and I want you to get on a plane and come here. By now, she lived in Atlanta with Marty and my nephew. So she's no longer in New York. So I fly to Atlanta and they've already done surgery when I get there because now she has massive aneurysms. It's a heredity, I mean, an inherited condition that she had. And they said if the surgeon said if he had waited, she would have been gone. And and the surgery was successful, but it was very touch and go. Her recovery was very touch and go. When she opened her eyes and looked at me and spoke, she spoke in math. She didn't speak any English words. She just started speaking equations to me, very highfalutin math equations. And I spoke back to her in English as if she were speaking very clearly and I could understand every word. But I knew, oh, wow, they've touched something in her brain where she's gone completely into the math world. And I came out and met with the surgeon, and he said, do you know anything about her first surgery? And I said, well, yes, I was there. And he said, oh my God, I've known about you for a decade. And I said, why would you know about me? And he said, that surgeon who operated on your sister was my roommate. And as two doctors together, he came home and shared what happened. And now I'm operating on your sister and I need your help. And I said, oh, it wasn't me. And I said, it's not my help you need. And I said, it's help of the divine. And he goes, but you were the vehicle of that. And I said, yes, but I didn't instigate it. You know, the divine is always watching over us. And I can only do what I'm told to do. And my sister asked me to be here, and I felt inwardly that's the right thing. So I'm here with you. But there's nothing I personally can do except be here and be as clear and open a vehicle as possible. And that's the only thing that you can do too. And it may or may not go any which way, but I said, you don't know the whole story. The whole story is that ultimately I learned there is no death. That just wasn't Debbie's time. And we don't know yet what this is. And he said, I want to hear the whole story. He called the nurse and he said, change my schedule. I want to hear the story. So the story you just heard about going into the ocean of mercy and love, he wanted to hear this whole thing. And he's this big man, over 6 feet tall. And he's sitting there crying like a baby through the whole thing because he said, I've been waiting and waiting to hear this story. Now, how is it that everything aligned for us to come together, for that man to hear this story, for him to be the surgeon, for him to have known about this previously, and now we're in a completely different state, and he's the surgeon working on my sister. So even I cried because I could see the synchronicity was just beyond anything I could ever imagine, that the hand of God is working in our lives all the time in every way, in ways that would absolutely amaze us. So I want to move forward a little bit. I had learned so much in my shared death experience. It changed everything for me. It transformed my understanding of reality. You realize that now in ways that I could never have understood previously. And my own life became one big, fascinating, spiritually transformative experience from one thing to the next. All the time, things just began to click and move forward. But I want to share with you one of the things because I had to look back and say, what instigated all of this? Where did this quickening come from so that I could be used that way? Because it's not about me, it's about each of us. And to me, it began in my classroom before the dolphin experience, because in my classroom, I have these students who are looking up to me, but I graduated from college early. I graduated when I was 21 years old and was already working on my master's degree. And I'm teaching literature and philosophy. And so they look at me and say, "What do you believe?" And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just a little girl from South Carolina who grew up a Southern Baptist. What the heck do I know? I don't know anything. But I'm learning all of these great philosophies and I'm studying them and I'm trying to teach them. And they're like, yeah, but where do you align? Do you believe what Emerson said? Do you understand transcendentalism? What do you think of this? I knew nothing. It's like I only read it, I don't know it. But slowly but surely, as my heart began to open, I began to understand where I resonated. But my prayer every hour on the hour, because I taught 7 classes a day, was, "Dear God, teach me truth so that I may teach truth." So that when they ask me, "What do you believe?" I would not just be telling them what I, this little Southern girl, might believe. I would be telling them the truth from a divine perspective, what I was guided to understand and learn. So each hour on the hour, it was, "Dear God, teach me truth so that I may teach truth." And I believe that's where this all began. Because when we ask for that, we're asking to be a co-worker with the divine. We're asking to be used for truth, to help share truth with the world. And when we open our hearts in that way, everything can begin to change. And we experience what my high school students, in many ways, they were smarter than me because, it's a bedroom community and all these, their fathers were doctors and lawyers and engineers. And when I came back from the dolphin experience into my classroom, they said, "What happened to you?" And I told them about the dolphin experience. And they said, "You've been quickened." That's the first time I ever heard the word quickened. What did that mean? I said. And they said, "It means that your energy has changed." And I said, "How do you know that?" And they said, "Well, you don't know what's going on here, but whenever we come into your classroom and now, and we sit in your classroom, we're smarter when we leave." So I might be a B student in math, this kid said, but when I leave here and I go take my math test, I make an A because suddenly I understand things better. And it's happening not just to me, he said, it's happening to the whole class. That's why so many people want in your class, not just because you're cute and they love you, it's because they're being quickened. That's what they want to do. They want to have that energy. And we can be that vehicle that helps other people to be quickened in the world when we align ourselves with the truth, when we align ourselves with the spiritual awareness of who we really are, that we are all great spiritual beings and we are meant to be co-workers with God. We are meant to be not alone, but in a one-to-one relationship with the divine. Once I was speaking around the world, and I think I was in London, and I was on an Indian television show, a television program, and I spoke about this concept that we're meant to be co-workers with the divine. To me, that had become a pretty universally understood concept. I believed everybody understood this concept that, had any spiritual awareness at all. And this was a spiritual television show that I was on. But the woman said, this is the woman host on live television said, "How dare you say that?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, how can you be so presumptuous? How can you presume to have any relationship with the divine? And I said, otherwise, why are we here? And she said, all right, I'm going to make an executive decision. I want to understand what you're talking about. So your 10-minute slot has just become 1 hour. We're going to take a break and I want you to stay. And so we spoke about that for an entire hour, trying to help that woman understand that we are actually divine beings ourselves, and that in order to have a real purpose in this lifetime, we need to align ourselves with that capacity and be that. So my next prayer became, Dear God, take and make the most of me. That's a prayer of surrender, because if we're co-workers, what else would we want except to be all we can be in this lifetime? So take and make the most of me became my prayer of surrender. And I got to explain that on Indian television. Great show. It was fun and wonderful to watch that woman awaken to who she really is, and that this relationship with the divine is not only possible, it's what we're here for. It's who we are. And we can be that for others as well, which is why an organization like Spiritual Awakenings International even exists, so that people have an opportunity to share their experiences and to learn from others and to be there for other people. So to me, I mean, it's really an honor to be a part of this organization. Now, I want to tell you that eventually I met my husband, Alden, my true love, and I had almost given up because I thought, who in goodness name could put up with me? I am the craziest, wildest human being, because you never know what's going to happen in my life, and it'll be so big sometimes that, it makes other people question their own sanity. And being with a normal person who didn't have this awareness was just not on the table for me. It just wasn't possible. And so one day I had asked, is it possible that there's another human being out there who I could be with as a true partner and not have to hide who I am and really step into it even more, where I could help him to grow and he could help me to grow, that we would have this reciprocal relationship? The next thing you know, Alden Butcher shows up in my life, and we have grown spiritually together and had many spiritually transformative experiences. And so that has quickened me. Being with him has quickened me tremendously. We've traveled all over the world together. We've spoken all over the world together, because even our coming together was a spiritually transformative experience. We had the opportunity to be together one evening, and a blue light began to pass between our foreheads, the third eye, and it looked like a blue neon tube, not something faint or questionable. And he looked at me and said, how are you doing that? And I said, I'm not doing it. It's just happening. But you can see it too. He goes, of course I can see it. Why wouldn't I see it? Well, you know about that. It's like the boyfriend hadn't seen the black hole staring right in front of us. So I didn't expect him to have that same level of awareness, but he did. We were the perfect match for each other. And I just want to say that the most powerful experience that I have ever had is in what we call Five Blue Rings. It's the story of our coming together, learning who we are, why we're here together on this planet in this lifetime. We consider it a story of danger, romance, and mystery, but it's really the story of our coming together. But it's also a message of hope for the planet. We have only recently completely finished the book and written the book proposal and sent it out to publishers. So hopefully we'll find a publisher who will understand what we're talking about and help us get this message in the world. But the picture that you see here is where I stand now, understanding that there is great energy pouring into our world. And the dichotomy that we see that we think is conflict is really about the transformation that's occurring. I like to think of it as one of the authors that I work with wrote about. He said, it's like the cocoon. So the caterpillar gets into the cocoon and it becomes a mush mess, right? So it's chaos in there. The whole caterpillar gets dissolved and it looks like death. And on a cellular level, it's a mushy soup that happens in that cocoon. And then with time, what emerges is the most beautiful butterfly imaginable. So these things that are happening to us in our world are all about that. We're in a cocoon stage. It looks like a mess, but we're going to come out beautifully on the other side as long as we remember to align ourselves with the divine as these great co-workers with the divine that we are and can be if we step into that and agree to do it. Now, remember, for me, it means follow all instructions as they are given. And so each day I try to align myself with that. I try to do what I'm told to do. I have clients who come to me and they want me to help them with their book, and I have to say no. And it's not based on the amount of money that I might make on that book. It's whether I'm told to do it, right? And so once you align yourself, you understand that you either say yes or no on things, not from a material perspective, but from the perspective of do all things as you are told. So you want to be a co-worker with the divine. You want to listen. You want those answers. And the only way to get more is to follow them. Show that you are a worthy vehicle, that you're capable of taking the action that you're told to take action to. It's why Spiritual Awakenings International exists, because I'm on the board with the founders and I understand that's exactly what they did. They heard, they followed, they listened, and they took the steps to make it happen. And I'm grateful to be a part of that. So I thank you. If you want to know more about Five Blue Rings, which I hope will be a book soon, it's fivebluerings.com. You can learn about it. My company is Dolphin Media Services. Dolphin, you understand why. Media Services, because that's what I do. And you can write me personally if you want to at my Gmail account. And I appreciate you being with me today and allowing me to have this time to tell the story of my sister. And to me, it's one of the dearest stories. I'm grateful I got through without being a puddly crying mess. And I hope it is uplifting to you as it has been in my life. So I'm happy to accept any questions now if we want to have Q&A and talk about the story or anything that might come up. So back to you, Yvonne.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. What an amazing and inspiring story. Thank you, Anne. It was just phenomenal. I invite anyone who has questions for Anne, please type them into the chat. And I will start with the first question. So you've talked a lot about something that I personally in my heart feel is very, very important, which is about being a co-creator with God and following divine will, wisdom, being in a place of surrender and trust. Can you share a little bit about what are some of the key ways you have found to advise others that they can utilize to make themselves clearer and clearer co-creators with God?
You know, speaking all over the world on these concepts, one of the things that I heard from someone once was when you began to really listen, how did you know you were hearing the voice of the divine? And my answer was practice. So they said, what does practice look like? And I said, well, it looked like this. If I'm making up the bed and I have the pink sheets or the gray sheets, I might ask, which sheets are the best ones to put on this bed right now? And maybe I get a nudge toward the pink sheets. So I assume that that's the divine in things that are not life and death. And I put the pink sheets on. And then I ask again about everything. I keep an ongoing dialogue with the divine. I do not wait until the moment that something near catastrophic occurs. I keep myself open and aware. It's like walking the dog and do we go this way or do we go this way? And I let that inner nudge tell me which way to go. It's not, I want this, so I will do that. right? So it is a matter of surrendering your personal will and opening your heart to the answers. And to me, that's really important that you practice doing that in the little things so that in the big things, there is no doubt.
Mhm. Awesome. Well put, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you.
Um, Another question I'd like to ask you, what are the most important principles that you learned from this experience and your other spiritually transformative experiences? And what would you like people who've been listening today, and you've had lots of positive feedback and hearts, what do you think are the most important principles that you want people to learn from the stories that you shared today?
Thank you, Yvonne. You're already speaking about one of them. It's that we are meant to be co-creators with the divine. That if we go off and we do something that looks cool to the world, but it's not in alignment with who we are and what the divine wants of us, then we're not living up to that take and make the most of me concept. And that to me is a key principle. We have that ability to co-create with the universe, whatever you want to call it, but we have to learn to listen. So we are guided, but first you must listen and then you must follow the instructions as they are given, right? And you'll begin to hear them more loudly. And many of you, I know, because of this audience, know exactly what I'm talking about. And when you hear it and you follow, it strengthens it. It's like a muscle that you have strengthened now so that it's there for you to call on. Principle number one is recognizing that you're not alone, that you are a divine being, that you're here to co work with the divine, and that your job is to listen and follow all instructions as they're given. Those are the key principles. But really, it's also about asking for help. That prayer that I said in the classroom, Dear God, teach me truth so that I may teach truth, that's me asking for help. I recognize I don't know. I don't know what I believe. I don't know what the highest truth is. Teach it to me. Share with me. I remember one time I said to my husband that a project I was working on was over my head. And he goes, What are you going to do about it? And I said, I'm going to ask for help. Well, Alden actually thought I was going to ask somebody for help. But what I did was I sit down and I did a spiritual exercise in which I said, If I'm not smart enough, make me smarter. If I'm not aware enough, make me more aware. Whatever it is that I need in order to do this, if this is what I'm supposed to do, give me that, please. I make myself open to that. And so asking for the help that we need, the next thing I know, I had so much assistance you would not believe. I aced the project, everything worked perfectly. But it's only because I asked. And so it's a reciprocal relationship. If you truly want a relationship with the divine, you have to recognize first who you are, that you're worthy, that you're capable, and that this is a mutable universe. Things can change on a dime if we just ask and keep our hearts open, whether it's our health or it's any number of things. That's the principles that I believe this story personifies and that I live by. Thanks for the question, Yvonne.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. Destiny has a question. She'd like to know is, can the divine work through very challenging experiences or through experiences that bring you way out of your comfort zone?
It's a great question. That's what the story Five Blue Rings is all about. I end up on this ship, and through circumstances that are just absolutely bizarre, I end up being asked to steer that ship or being put in a position where I have to steer that ship. And I never even steered a rowboat. I'm not even a person who likes to drive a car. And now I have a 300-foot ship which has no new modern conveniences, no tools, no nothing to tell you anything. And somehow I have to take this ship from Seattle to LA in open international waters. And I didn't want to do it. And I absolutely did not have any capacity to do it. And yet I was in a position where I had to do it, or the circumstances were going to be bad. And I just assumed that I knew everything I needed to know. I did do that because this old sea captain who was there, who also couldn't steer this ship, said, "Well, stop saying you don't know what to do." Because I kept saying, "Oh my God, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do." And he goes, "Just stop that." So he's actually swearing at me, but I recognize the Zen quality of him saying, "Stop saying that you don't know what to do." And so I switched it to, "I know everything I need to know. I know exactly what to do. I understand the currents of the ocean. I know how this ship works." It became a rolling mantra with my hands on the wheel, not knowing anything. And suddenly, a blue light filled the wheelhouse, and a mist, some mysterious spiritual mist, came into the room, not from the ocean. The doors are completely closed. It's a spiritual mist, cooling and beautiful. And suddenly I knew everything I needed to know. And that begins the story of Five Blue Rings, where I end up steering that ship. I know everything there is to know about the ship through absolutely no intellectual capacity that I might ever have had. So, yes, that the story actually is one challenging situation after the next, each one of them almost scarier than the next and the next and the next. So the answer is absolutely. You then that's the crucible. That's the test. You better have practiced before that, though. You better start practicing in the small things. That's how you know you'll be okay when the big things hit, because you have learned how to listen, and the divine will take over in ways that we can't even fathom at times.
Mhm. Awesome. Thank you, Anne. So we learn and practice with the pink sheets guidance. And we get tested with a boat, a ship. That's a big test. Wonderful. And Sarah has a question. She'd like to know, what did John see or experience when you were gone into the void, into the tunnel, into the portal?
So he continued to hold me tightly, but he said my body shivered the entire time, almost as if my body was kind of in shock. It was going through something. And so he knew intuitively that holding me close to him was really important instead of just leaving my body on its own. And that gave me a sense of strength when I came back, because I was able to get in my car and drive and go to class. So, John, I actually think John was about to leave me and not be with me anymore when he came back to my house the next day and my phone was ringing. It was my mother trying to reach me, because we didn't have cell phones. She either had my phone at home or there was nobody going to be able to reach me. She didn't even know the name of my high school, because, you didn't back then. You didn't know these things. And you certainly wouldn't call work for somebody. So John came back to my apartment before he knew to pack the bag. The reason he came back to my apartment, I believe, was he came back to get his stuff. He was going to leave. He wanted to get the heck out of Dodge because the sunburned eyes was really shocking to him. I'm sitting there with blue eyes with perfect white eyeballs, and the next thing you know, I'm completely sunburned. He thinks something extremely weird has happened, and I think he wanted no part of it. When he discovered it was my sister and I was able to save her life, it became a spiritually transformative experience for him. That's the only way I can say it, because in the aftermath of it, he recognized, wow, I was a part of that. But no, he didn't see anything. He didn't have any awareness. He just knew he was holding on to a shivering, shaking body, trying to give it comfort while it waited to be reconnected with spirit.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. Um, Ellen has an interesting question. She'd like to know, how does your understanding from your STEs explain the differences between religions and belief systems?
Well, that's a big one. That's why I was studying comparative world religions. And of course, I found a path for myself that fit perfectly. But I believe it's important not to proselytize our own path, but to acknowledge everyone's path to God. And Spiritual Awakenings International is big on that. We acknowledge all paths, all religions, or none at all. Whatever it is that's appropriate for a person in that moment, in that time, we acknowledge that that's what's right for them and encourage people to follow that. And so step back from telling anybody else what to believe or what not to believe. And I believe there's room for all of us to coexist in a world where we know there's one divine concept that supersedes all others, and it's love and compassion. Remember, I was standing in the ocean of mercy and love. And that to me is the high spiritual principle. And whatever path leads you to greater love and compassion and service. Service is, I mean, God is the greatest servant of all. God serves all life. We're meant to be servants. That's who we are. We're meant to surrender and serve the divine will. When we do that, we become much, much more of than we were before. We align ourselves with divine and we become much greater vehicles of the divine and able to serve in this world better than we would have otherwise. So I hope that answers the question.
Awesome. Well, that was a beautiful answer, Anne. Thank you. Karen would like to know, can you say more about quickening, please? I think it's a framework that helps me understand what's happening in my relationships lately.
When I was speaking all over the world, excuse me, this concept came up quite a bit because people can be quickened by a piece of music. They can be quickened by their spiritual exercises or going to church, or we can bring our vibration down, no longer in a quickened state, by exposing ourselves to things that aren't uplifting. My husband is fussing at me because I was really attracted to this murder mystery show that we're watching in this whole series. And he's like, "Aren't you tired of murder?" It's probably not the best thing for our quickening, right? Because whatever uplifts your vibration, whatever takes you into a higher state so that you can be a higher vehicle, that's your quickening. So in some cases, it's being around some people versus other people. Some people will take us to a higher level. It doesn't mean you just cut out all the people. You just approach everybody with more love and compassion and choose to surround yourself as much as possible with those people and things that help you to feel that you're more spiritually aligned than you would be otherwise. So the quickening occurs sometimes not of our own volition, like with the dolphins. I didn't want to be approached by a shark and almost eaten on Christmas Day, for goodness sake. And yet, that often is the case that the very thing that we think we would not want is the thing that will bring us to what we do want. And so we quit kicking and screaming our way through life, complaining and whining, and we ask to be shown the gifts and the direction in everything. And that's part of the quickening. It's always moving forward to where we can be the greatest vehicles that we possibly can be.
Awesome. What a beautiful answer, Anne. Thank you.
Of course.
Tim has actually two questions. I'm going to ask both of them. Um, would like to know, why do you think there is so much suffering, and what can we do to get beyond it, rise above it? And his second question is, what is your view about death now? Do you have any fear about death?
Let's start with the death thing. Um, I don't have any fear of death. And And I don't believe in death. I believe that we continue to exist as consciousness far beyond what we believe is death. Excuse me. And so I don't have any fear of death, but I don't necessarily want to leave yet. But the reason I want longevity is so that I can continue to serve, not just to be here, not just to have fun, but in order to be a vehicle for greater things on this planet if I can. Which takes us to the other question of what was it? Oh, why do I think there's so much suffering?
And how can we rise above it being
It's the
impacted
crucible,
by all the suffering?
of course.
Mhm.
It's the crucible. The crucible comes for each of us in our own way. And when we are going through a big movement on the planet, as I believe we are now, that's what Five Blue Rings is about. You have more potential. So you have this great potential, but the balance to that, because it's a yin yang world, it's always light, dark, cold, hot. It's a yin yang world. The balance to that is that there is suffering for us personally and for the planet, but we can rise above it with alignment, keeping ourselves aligned with the divine. We can be compassionate to others, but we also can help ourselves to grow and stay above the fray.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. I think this will be our final question, and it comes from Linda. And Linda would like to know about the five blue rings. What's the present prospect? Any hope that it's going to become a film? She'd like to know.
So you probably know the story that when when I was speaking all over the world, I told the dolphin story in San Francisco to about 5,000 people. Someone in the audience was from Hollywood. He heard it and he said to the guy sitting next to him, he goes, "Do you know who that woman is?" And he goes, "Yeah, I know her personally." And he goes, "Oh my God, do you have her phone number?" And he said, "Yeah, I do." And he goes, "I want her to come to Hollywood and tell that dolphin story." And he goes, "No, what you want to hear is Five Blue Rings. Call her and ask her to come to Hollywood and tell you the story of Five Blue Rings. You just heard the dolphin story. You already know it. Ask about Five Blue Rings." So I got this call to go to Hollywood. Alden and I were living in Minnesota, but my daughter lived in LA. So I told Alden I'll go down to LA and be there for a couple of days. I was there a month. I presented to every major studio in Hollywood. I kept getting one invitation after the next to tell this story at Sony TriStar that she actually said, "Okay, we're interested. Give us the manuscript." And I said, "I don't have a manuscript. I haven't written one word yet." And she goes, "How did you even get in here? Why is everybody talking about you if you haven't written the story yet?" So that was decades ago. And what happened after that was Paramount Pictures picked it up and said they wanted to create both a New York Times bestselling book and a blockbuster film out of this story. The only caveat, and the producer said, "Anne, you're not going to like this, honey." And I said, "What could I not like between a blockbuster film and a New York Times bestselling book? That's what I would want for this story." And he said, "You have to sign legal documents in perpetuity saying that it's fiction, that not one word of it is true." And I said, "I can't do that. My husband won't do it. He's so aligned with truth. He couldn't lie if he needed to save his life. It's not possible. So we can't do that. It would be a lie. We'd be bringing this story forward that's supposed to be aligned with truth with a lie." And he goes, "Yeah, I know. I agree. I don't think you should sign it, but there'll come a time when the planet has shifted and this won't need to be presented as fiction. People will know enough that you can present it as truth." So that's where we are now. We trust that's where we are now. And we did finish the story. It went through many, many, many variations. And finally, we love what we have and we're ready to put it into the world. And we've sent it out to the right publishing houses, I hope, and we'll see what happens next. So I have no idea. It's in the hands of the divine.
Awesome.
But thank you for asking.
So thank you, Anne, for an absolutely spectacular presentation. Some people in the comments have said this is a master class, and I would agree with it. Thank you so very much. And I know thousands will enjoy watching this on video, where it
Thank you.
will be released in a few weeks. Thank you.